So I'm joined here today by the head of maths, Mr. Zub of North Sydney Boys High School.
Hi.
So you weren't always a maths teacher, were you?
No.
Your first job was in computer programming?
Yeah, my first job was in the IT industry.
Could you expand a little on that?
A really brief overview, I did an electronics degree at the University of Western Australia. It was a 4-year course. And when I graduated, this was in Western Australia, when I graduated, I left, I went to Sydney. I wasn't sure actually what I wanted to do. And kind of by accident, I fell into a computer programming job.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out I found my career, which was to work in the IT industry.
And just following on that, what skills do you need in industry?
Wow.
So I guess what I'm really
I think, look, you're going to work in a field, so you need some specific skills.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, in IT, obviously I needed to know how to program.
Okay.
Yeah, so I already knew how to program. I became a better programmer as I did more of it. I learned from the people around me. I learned that the particular domain of the industry I was working in, it was entertainment ticketing industry, so I learned about how that industry worked.
Okay.
So that I could actually apply that to the program and make sure the program actually did the right thing for the business.
Right.
So that's your fundamental skill in any place you're going to go to. If you're going to be a doctor, you need to know how to do surgery. If you're going to be a teacher, you need to know how to teach. But there's a broader perspective, which is you need to actually be able to communicate to people. You need to have a business sense to understand what the business is doing, what the business is trying to achieve. And you need to be able to translate your skill so that you can actually make it work for the business with people.
Right, okay.
And putting those things together, you need to be able to think like a businessman, you need to be able to think like a customer, like a client, and you need to think like a manager. If you're smart, you'll learn to think how your boss thinks, and even better, how your boss's boss thinks.
Yeah, okay.
So it's a much broader thing than just being an expert in a skill.
And specifically for you, the skills you learned in uni, which one of those were really applied when you started working?
It's interesting. I think the biggest shock of university for a high school student is how unorganised, how little the university cares about you, at least until maybe you're in 3rd or 4th year.
Right.
And so you, in order to survive and to make it, and this is how you know someone who's got a 4-year university degree, you know they've survived, they've actually worked out how to manage themselves. They've learned out how to plan themselves, how to learn for themselves, how to manage their time, how to do their assignments on time, how to teach themselves, and also how to work with other students. So they've learnt all those skills. So those are the skills, I think, more than anything else, a really good quality university education is going to give you. The ability to, it sounds cliche, to learn how to learn.
Right, okay.
But it's real. It's that meta learning. It almost doesn't matter what you study. I think it almost doesn't matter what you study at university. It's the fact that you've gotten through a 4-year course, and hopefully it's a highbrow enough course that you've actually learned some really solid skills. And if you're lucky, and I don't think it happens for enough undergraduate students, you've actually learned to think in an academic way.
Right.
In an academic mindset, which I saw a bit in my undergraduate degree. Later, when I learned to become a teacher in my postgraduate degree, when I did my Masters of Teaching, I really learnt that academic viewpoint, how to engage with research, how to think and deal with problems in an academic way rather than in a business or a practical way.
Yeah.
And so you ultimately, when you get out into the workforce, that's the power that you bring, because in most business places, people are not thinking at those levels. They're dealing with immediate issues, and having that intellectual approach, but with a practical bent, makes you very powerful.
Right, yeah.
The other thing about a good university course, I think, is it's multidisciplinary.
Yeah.
I was very lucky. I did an engineering course, which meant I did some maths, I did some science. We had some of those fluffy type units about engineering and society and things like that, which I really loved, which really broadened my perspectives. In retrospect, I wish I'd also done an arts unit of some type to balance it out and blend it. Unfortunately, I got that in my postgraduate work. I got to see the other side of the academic world.
So you have done a postgraduate and you are now a teacher. What specifically about mathematics is it that draws you?
And mathematics has its own spirit. It has its own joy, its own way of approaching things, looking at problems, how to model. It's got its own language. it's got its own subtlety and its own beauty. It really is its own thing. Many people think of it as a practical subject, and it is a practical subject, but it also, there's an art to it and an inner beauty in it. And part of the joy is going out into the world and discovering problems and realising that you can actually apply those, and you can actually discover patterns and extend them, and maybe do something useful with it as well. So that's the joy of the mathematics part.
Right.
Unfortunately, just because you're good at maths doesn't mean you're good at teaching it.
Yeah.
So there are some people who are very good at maths, but they're actually very poor at teaching it. And the challenge, depending on your environment, you wouldn't see this at this school so much, but in most schools, because this is not a typical school, in most schools you are teaching mathematics to people who haven't seen that light yet and who don't have that skill.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to see it from their point of view.
Yeah.
You have to be able to empathise, and you have to be able to communicate.
All the skills you learned in university, how did you apply that becoming a teacher?
Well, it comes in so many ways. So the most obvious is the actual academic content, the subject content that I learned.
Right.
So I apply that. I'm not teaching at a university level to the students, but it informs what I teach. So one of my goals as a teacher is not just to teach just for their final exam at the end of year 12, it's to actually prepare them so that when they come across new concepts and ideas at university level, they're like, oh wow, we saw some of that, or we could see where that's leading to. So in that sense, the content that I learned at university enriches my teaching and allows me to create background and depth into the teaching. Yeah. In a more subtle way, some of the skills you learn from the STEM subjects, how to organise, how to plan, how to take data, how to analyse data, how to form hypotheses about how things work, how to experiment. That's interesting, I've only just realised that. How to experiment, so it gives you the confidence, I'm going to try this idea. How would I know if this idea works? So you're learning these rational skills and these empirical skills, how to do stuff. Those things I think make me a better teacher, because as a teacher you're constantly collecting data from students, data from teachers. As a head teacher, collecting a lot of data. Yeah. You have to analyse that data, you have to model it. As a teacher in your classroom, you're conducting experiments all the time. The kids don't realise that they're guinea pigs. We're trying out new ideas. So, I talked about what I did in my classroom with the whiteboards. That's a guinea pig. They're guinea pigs. I'm trying it out. Right. And so I'm using my science background and my engineering background as well. One of the things I love in engineering is this, we'll try and make work. We don't worry too much about getting a precise answer. Right. We're just going to try something and see what happens and feel. And so that approach, as a teacher, you use all the time.
Right, okay.
So it gives you the confidence to try experiments, and then the confidence to be able to objectively assess them.
Right.
So it gives you those skills. So yeah, in so many different ways, that mindset from the sciences and from engineering allows you to move around in the education sphere and try these ideas out with confidence. Also to have the confidence of being wrong.
Yeah.
I think one of the best things you can learn it from, and it comes from that mature university level thinking, is intellectual honesty. And it's interesting you asked about what can you offer a business. Sometimes there isn't intellectual honesty in business.
Yeah.
And but it needs it at certain times. Businesses often need to face up to a problem, and they don't want to face up to it. Or there can be short-term thinking rather than long-term thinking. So those skills you learn, science and maths teach you honesty, intellectual honesty. Did it really work? When I measure a result and it looks like it's a success, other people who don't know the background go, it worked 90% of the time, so it must be right.
Right.
Whereas a science mind will say, hang on, why didn't it work 10% of the time? What's going on? You go back and look at your data. Actually, it didn't work 30% of the time. I misread the data, and I didn't take this case into account, and why? So it's that honest intellectual curiosity.
Right.
And so in that way, I think that, to me, that's STEM thinking.
Yeah.
An honest, open inquiry, an ability to discuss and ask questions and engage. You do get that in other disciplines, but it doesn't have the same
It's hard to explain. It operates differently.
Right, great. Thank you, Mr. Zuma.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah.